Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. I wanted to take this opportunity to speak to New Brunswickers directly because there has been a lot going on in our province and in our country and around the world over the last number of months. And I have been getting your messages, your emails, your phone calls, and hearing from you in the community about how you're feeling about what we're going through. And so I wanted to speak directly to New Brunswickers to acknowledge that we hear you feeling unrest, uncertain about what's happening, feeling frustrated, angry by what's happening in the U.S., feeling scared about what this means for our province and our future. Je voulais vraiment nommer les émotions qu'on entend des Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises qui nous disent qu'ils ne sont pas certains qu'est-ce qui va venir. Ils ont de l'anxiété pour leur emploi, pour leur communauté, pour notre province et pour notre pays. Et je voulais être ici pour être reconnaissant de ces émotions et aussi de les valider. It is a time of uncertainty. It's clear that we are going through something that is unprecedented, that New Brunswick has never experienced before. And so it is normal that many people are feeling scared and unsure. It is completely normal that many of us are feeling angry and frustrated at what is happening with the U.S. and with our economy and on a number of different files. So the purpose of me being here today is really to speak to some of those frequently asked questions that I receive from New Brunswickers, to talk about the things that you want to talk about and to provide a forum for regular communication during a time of consistent uncertainty. The one thing that is consistent is the uncertainty that we know is happening. C'est clairement un temps qui est imprévu, qui est incertain. Alors moi, je voulais assurer qu'on a un mode de communication avec les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises qui est là pour toute la pour toute l'occasion de ces incertitudes. So you will find me here every Thursday at noon for the coming weeks until we are through this period of uncertainty and disruption and past the threat that New Brunswickers are currently feeling to their jobs, to their communities, and to their way of life. The content may change week on week, and maybe some weeks we won't have much of an update to give, but we'll be here anyway to talk to you and let you know what's going on. Clearly, since the last time I was sitting here on Tuesday of a little more than a week ago, we had tariffs imposed by the U.S. that were very shortly removed. And then we had aluminum tariffs come back and get imposed on March 12th, suggested that they would be doubled, but they're in place at 25%. Now we have Chinese tariffs that have shown up in the marketplace to be put on very shortly. And so the situation is changing on a regular basis, but your team in government is on top of it. And I want to make sure New Brunswickers know that we've got your back. We are focused on making sure that our province gets through this period of uncertainty as best we can all together. Je vais prendre l'opportunité pour valider que ces émotions sont normales et moi je les sens aussi. I can't tell you how frustrating it is and how angry it makes me that somebody is threatening the very existence of our province, threatening to annex Canada, that we become the 51st state. It makes sense to feel angry and to want to lash out and to react to those things and to hit them back and to hit them where it hurts. We are trying to do this with cooler heads that will prevail and make the kind of decisions for how we respond to this threat in a way that best protects New Brunswickers, that has the least impact on our jobs and our economy, on our communities, and on our future. Alors notre objectif, même si on est fâché, même si on veut se battre et on veut faire du mal à nos voisins aux États-Unis, on doit faire des décisions, prendre des décisions qui sont responsables pour protéger les Néo-Brunswickois et les Néo-Brunswickoises. On veut assurer un impact le minimum possible pour notre province. Alors, je veux seulement vous rassurer qu'on sent les mêmes émotions, on sent frustré aussi, nous sommes fâchés aussi. C'est pas clair qu'est-ce qui va venir et le futur, c'est incertain. What is clear to me is that we have a fantastic team of people within our cabinet, within the civil service, within stakeholders, our business community, our municipal leaders, and within this province that are all ready to put their shoulder to the wheel, to pitch in, to collaborate and work together to make sure that New Brunswick gets through this, that we weather this storm together and we come out the other side stronger. And so I want to reassure New Brunswickers that we are working on this on a day-to-day basis, and we have taken action. I'll take a moment to repeat some of the actions that we've taken, because I know in the changing winds of every day, tariffs on and tariffs off and what's happening, it can be easy to lose track of what's happening. New Brunswick stopped the purchase of U.S. alcohol back when we first thought the tariffs were going to be put in place, so back in February. We haven't reordered that alcohol, but we did remove it from the shelves last Tuesday when the tariffs were enacted by the U.S., and we have not put it back on the shelves, even though they didn't follow through with those 25% and 10% tariffs on goods and on energy products. So we know that that's bothering the Americans. On sait qu'ils sont frustrés. On entend les paroles des PDG de plusieurs compagnies d'alcool qui sont frustrés, qui ne peuvent pas vendre leurs produits ici en Nouveau-Brunswick ou autour du Canada. It's a move we made in partnership with other provinces. We have stopped the procurement of goods from U.S. companies. We have looked at replacing service contracts to U.S. companies as well. We're actually going so far as to look at every single engagement with Americans. There's a look right now at our fleet vehicles and whether we need to sell off the vehicles in our fleet that are from companies that are seeking to do New Brunswickers harm. So everything is being considered. We took immediate action to put a support package in place. We wanted to reassure businesses in New Brunswick that with the tariffs in place, we were going to be here to help them through the challenging period. And so that's why you saw last week myself with my colleagues, Minister Randall, Minister Damour, and Minister Finnegan, talking about the supports in place for companies impacted. Capital, working capital supports, competitiveness supports, market diversification supports, and supports for employees that may find themselves impacted. We were pleased that the federal government came forward and also offered support packages of their own and tools of their own to help any person or business impacted by these tariffs. Alors, nous sommes prêts avec ces programmes aujourd'hui. On les considère, on parle avec les travailleurs et les entrepreneurs pour assurer que quand les conditions changent, quand on sait qu'il y a des nouvelles qui viennent des États-Unis, on est prêt à répondre. Right now, in place in New Brunswick, our steel and aluminum companies are experiencing a 25% tariff. And that does impact New Brunswickers. Some folks may be aware that we do have a steel industry here in New Brunswick and companies that are experiencing those tariffs directly. So the support packages that are in place are available to them. We have other companies that are experiencing the impacts of the retaliatory tariffs that the Government of Canada put in place. And so we have tools available to support them through this period. Je veux vous rassurer qu'on est là pour vous autres et qu'on fait ce travail ensemble avec vos leaders communautaires, vos leaders d'entreprise, vos chambres de commerce, vos associations d'industrie. C'est un travail qu'on fait à chaque semaine avec beaucoup de communication. The bottom line of some of this is that it's prompted us to realize we need to retool our economy. We need to really reduce our dependence on the U.S. And so while we have long made efforts for export diversification, we have doubled down on the work that we're doing to find new customers and new markets, not only for our petroleum and forestry and agriculture and aquaculture products, but to any New Brunswicker who wants to go out and sell across Canada and around the world. We're going to leverage the Canadian-European Trade Agreement. We're going to build relationships with direct customers in Asia. We have a team that is putting their energy into that, and we have hosted a number of sessions with business to make sure that we can get out and reach those new markets and that we're doing that work aggressively. C'est vraiment important qu'on doit trouver des opportunités pour de la croissance dans le Canada et autour du monde avec une équipe qui fait le travail de la diversification de notre marché avec plus d'énergie que jamais. Et je veux remercier tous les entrepreneurs qui participent dans ce programme-là. We're also working really hard on internal trade barriers. You heard from my colleague, Minister Jean-Claude Demoule, that New Brunswick has already put up 50% of our procurement exemptions to be removed. We have taken the lead on labor mobility, and we have passed through Cabinet a program that recognizes provincial credentials from any other province in 52 regulated industries here in New Brunswick so that people can come here and get to work in our health sectors, in our construction sectors, where they are needed. If you have a Canadian credential, you can come to New Brunswick and get to work right away. It's not something we're doing conditional on reciprocity. It's something that we're doing up front to help make sure that the New Brunswick economy can move and has access to the labor it needs. We're also exploring new opportunities. I've talked before about the opportunity that critical minerals present here in New Brunswick. We have a number of minerals in this province that are going into products that are in high demand, whether that's solar panels or batteries or computer screens or others. We have an investment market and a defense market that is extremely interested in those minerals. And so you will see in the coming months a much more aggressive move on critical minerals in this province to create the kind of opportunities that will allow us to grow through the adversity that we're facing right now. Il y a plusieurs opportunités importantes qu'on va poursuivre dans cette province pour utiliser l'opportunité de trouver de nouveaux clients, d'utiliser nos ressources d'une façon différente, là où on les a besoin, pour nos priorités environnementales, pour notre priorité économique. Alors, vous allez voir l'utilisation de nos ressources, des minéraux importants ici en Nouveau-Brunswick dans le futur. Now I want to talk specifically about the questions that New Brunswickers are asking me the most, and I'm going to try to focus my comments on those in the future because I try to look at every Facebook message, to look at every DM, to look at every email. The reality is I can't get to all of those messages and I can't respond to each of you individually, so I'm going to attempt to use this forum to jump into some of those questions that I'm getting most often. J'aimerais essayer, parce que je ne peux pas répondre directement, personnellement, à chaque message que je reçois. Il y en a trop, mais ceux et celles que je vois dans mes messages de Facebook, dans mes courriels, je vais essayer de les répondre ici. The first one is around the situation with Maine. I've had many people reach out and say, how come you haven't done what Doug Ford did? Doug reached out and said he was going to shut down electricity to the U.S. And then switch that to a 25% tariff to the U.S. And I appreciate that New Brunswickers want to see us hit back and take a tough action like that. The reality in New Brunswick and our relationship to supply energy to northern Maine and others is different than how Ontario engages by selling their power on the spot market. We have contracts in place. Some of those contracts do not allow for us to levy different fees and tariffs, while others do. We also purchase power from the U.S. when we need to, when LaPro isn't producing the way it wants, or when we have spikes. We purchase, in some cases, up to 1,000 I think it's giga kilowatt hours from the U.S. And so anything we do to them, we are at risk of them doing back to us. And so our team is taking a very careful look at the impact to New Brunswick, the impact to NB Power, the impact to our neighbors, and choosing not to use that tool at this moment, and to consider how we might use that tool in the future should the U.S. proceed with more tariffs on our economy than the current steel and aluminum tariffs that are in place. We believe that it is not the time for escalation. We want to be responsible in our decision-making and protect New Brunswickers for the long term and protect NB Power's revenue streams. But I do want to say that I feel you when you tell me you want to hit back and you want to see us cutting off our neighbors because it's what the U.S. president has done and that they deserve to feel some pain from this. And so I hope that folks understand that we want to be very considered and responsible in any decision that's going to affect the people next door who come and do business in New Brunswick day in and day out, who we want to spend their tourism dollars in this province. Je sais que le monde veut qu'on réagit. Et on réagit avec de la force, qu'on va répondre de façon immédiate. Moi, je veux qu'on prenne une grosse considération, qu'on prenne des décisions avec beaucoup de pensée, sans une réaction vite, parce qu'on a des émotions qui disent qu'on veut frapper nos voisins. On a des situations avec l'énergie Nouveau-Brunswick où on a des contrats pour l'électricité qu'on leur vend. Ce n'est pas de même comme Ontario qui vend leur électricité sur le marché de la minute. On a des contrats qui ne nous laissent pas l'opportunité de mettre des levies ou des tarifs sur cette énergie. Puis, on achète de l'énergie de les États-Unis aussi et on est à risque qu'ils vont faire la même chose qu'on fait à eux autres, qui va être vraiment difficile pour la province. Alors, on continue de considérer nos options, d'avoir ces outils disponibles si on voit qu'il y a des tarifs qui avancent. À ce point, avec le seul tarif de 25 sur l'aluminium et l'acier, on n'est pas prêt à utiliser quelque chose qu'on pense que va avoir un impact négatif pour les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises et pour l'énergie Nouveau-Brunswick. But I also want to talk a little bit more about NB Power because I certainly get a lot of messages about the power utility, and I feel your frustration at the power bills that have been going up month over month, the fact that we called for an audit to NB Power, that they didn't deliver that report when we wanted it. They now need more time to dig in. Our government saw the pain of increased power rates a long time ago and committed to take 10% off of your power bill to try to reduce what you were paying for electricity, but it clearly is not enough. We have to do more and different with NB Power because the status quo is not an option. So I want you to know that the government is looking at many different options of what we can do, both with NB Power, with the situation you're facing on these increased rates. We need answers. We want them to continue with the audit they're doing, but we are looking at many other options to address the situation, and you will hear from us in the weeks ahead on what's going to happen in terms of the power utility and the bills and challenges that New Brunswickers are facing. Je veux vous assurer qu'on n'a pas arrêté de penser de vous et de les factures élevées que vous recevez et le fait qu'on n'a pas de réponse à nos questions. On voulait réduire vos prix d'électricité. On a mis en place une réduction de 10% de vos factures d'électricité, mais ce n'était pas assez. On n'est pas fini. On ne peut pas continuer avec le statu quo, avec l'énergie Nouveau-Brunswick. On attendait les résultats de leur évaluation. On ne l'a pas reçu à la comité de l'Assemblée législative. On attend encore. On a besoin des réponses et on a besoin d'agir avec Énergie Nouveau-Brunswick d'une différente façon. Alors, notre équipe regarde plusieurs options pour vous aider, pour changer la trajectoire de Énergie Nouveau-Brunswick. Et vous allez entendre de nous autres dans quelques semaines qu'est-ce qui est notre prochaine étape et les choses qu'on va faire pour adresser la situation. The third one that I wanted to touch on that fits into the most frequently asked questions in my inbox and in my messages is in relation to property taxes. We know many people have experienced significant increases to their property taxes, to their assessments, and now to their bills. There is a process in place. If you think that those amounts are out of whack, I have had people bring me their bills and say, look at this figure, it doesn't correspond. Where do I go for help? So I wanted to make sure, I'm going to pull up the number here, that if you're having challenges where your property tax bill does not match with the assessment and with the rates that you see, you can call 1-888-762-8600 to talk to our property tax team and to dig in where there may be discrepancies. We are past the time to appeal your property tax assessment, but we are hearing from folks who have seen challenges in the actual bill amount, the rate that was applied and how. And so if that applies to you, if that's one of your issues, then we want you to go to the website that's in place. There are support programs in place as well to help folks with their bills. Et on veut aussi que vous appelez l'équipe pour les évaluations foncières. C'est 1-888-762-8600. Je sais que plusieurs personnes ont reçu des factures qui s'inquiètent de l'augmentation. Nous avons des programmes de support qui sont décrits sur le site web. Alors, je vous encourage d'utiliser ces outils-là, d'appeler l'équipe pour recevoir de la clarté et de l'aide. So I've covered a lot of stuff, and I can appreciate that it right now it can be pretty easy to get overwhelmed with all the information, the news that's changing on a daily basis, what you see in your feed, what you hear from your neighbors, with the bills that are coming in, bills that are going up, whether that's power bills or property tax bills or others, wondering whether your job is going to be there tomorrow, whether that employer in your community is going to be there tomorrow. It is a time of great uncertainty, and our team wants you to know that we are there with you, working through these challenges. If you are feeling the kind of stress and anxiety that you're really struggling with, we also want New Brunswickers to know that you can reach out for support. We have a mental health helpline that is available at 1-866-355-5550. On a un numéro pour le monde qui se trouve dans une période de difficulté, qui cherche des solutions pour leur anxiété et leur inquiétude. On a une ligne de soutien, une ligne d'aide en santé mentale qui est à 1-866-355-5550. We want you to reach out. Times like this where we don't know what's happening next, it's a great time to be with your friends, to get outdoors, to clear your head, to turn off the news, and to reach out to the people around you, because New Brunswickers are resilient, kind, and helpful folks. Your neighbors and your friends are going to be there for you. Your government is going to be here for you. We've got your back. We are working on this issue. We are working on NB Power. And that doesn't stop the work that we're doing to improve the healthcare system, to get more doctors practicing in New Brunswick, to put the community clinics in place that let you address your #1 priority of health. I know that this is a stressful time, and I want to make sure New Brunswickers know that your government is feeling that, and we are here to put in place the support programs, the reactions, the cancel of U.S. booze, the movement to diversify our workplaces, to tackle the issues that are structural with NB Power, and to hear your concerns and to connect with you on a regular basis. So I hope you'll join me back here next Thursday at noon. We'll give you another update on what's going on with the tariff wars and in our province. Nous sommes ici pour communiquer avec vous et j'apprécie énormément tout le monde qui me partage des courriels, des messages sur les réseaux sociaux, des appels, ceux qui me parlent à l'épicerie ou sur la rue. Je sais que vous dites « Oh, je m'excuse pour interrompre votre temps personnel. » Non, 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 je veux que vous partagez avec moi c'est quoi vos inquiétudes, c'est quoi vos besoins, comment est-ce qu'on peut partager les informations dont vous avez besoin, la communication dont vous avez besoin pour ce qu'on peut tout procéder dans ce temps d'incertitude ensemble, et on peut réaliser nos objectifs comme une province forts et unis de l'autre côté de ces enjeux. So I want to thank you, everyone that is sending me emails and phone calls and messages on social networks, that you're coming up to me in the streets or at the market or otherwise saying, I'm really sorry to bother you, but you don't have to apologize. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's keeping New Brunswickers up at night, so that as your government, we can be constantly providing you with the information and the communication that you need to get through a period that is scary and that is stressful and that is uncertain. We don't know what the President of the United States is going to do tomorrow, but what I know is that you have a team here in government, a group of community leaders in New Brunswick, and a group of New Brunswickers that are resilient and that are ready to weather this storm together. So reach out, continue to reach out, and I'll see you back here next Thursday at noon. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Premier. We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. Each reporter will have a question and a very quick follow-up. You have the right to pose your questions in the official language of your choice. Just to let you know, I will be alternating between members of the media who are present in the room and online. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Chaque journaliste aura droit à une question suivie. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Et pour votre information, je vais alterner entre les membres des médias qui sont présents dans la salle et ceux qui sont en ligne. We have approximately about half an hour for this. I will start with Jacques Poitras, CBC.
Thank you. I guess I'm not sure why we're here if you're telling people to turn off the news and turn off credible sources of information. But I'll start by asking, do you think there's going to be a point where you have to tell New Brunswickers that they should expect to experience some pain or make some sacrifices to push back? I mean, you say you don't want to do anything that will hurt New Brunswickers, but others have expressed the idea that that may be necessary, and you seem to be advocating a pain-free response for New Brunswickers.
Well, the tariffs will cause pain to New Brunswickers. The 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum that the president has put in place are going to impact New Brunswick businesses and workers, and they are doing so today. And so there is significant pain that is going to be caused on the New Brunswick economy and New Brunswick workers based on the actions of the U.S. We need to respond in the most strategic ways possible that can be successful in eliminating those tariffs more quickly or reducing them without putting unnecessary pain on New Brunswickers. If I'm going to ask New Brunswickers to go through pain that I'm going to put on them, it better be because that's going to yield a result of reducing or eliminating the tariffs that the Americans have put in place, and not just for show. It has to be something that's going to strategically achieve our objective of getting rid of tariffs, because these tariffs are causing pain right now. People are stressed out and afraid. Businesses have stopped investing. They've stopped hiring. It's hurting our bottom line. It's hurting our ability to improve and deliver the services that New Brunswickers deserve. And so I absolutely want to minimize the pain that New Brunswickers are going to experience through this as much as possible, and make sure that we get through it, because life is challenging for New Brunswickers right now, and it's not my place or my desire to make it any more challenging than it has to be, unless that's in service of reducing the long-term pain.
Okay, and when then do you escalate anything in your measures? I mean, you've repeated what you've already announced, but if necessary, when will there be a next step? And can you tell me how many service contracts with U.S. suppliers have actually been canceled or not renewed?
So the when depends on what happens in the U.S. So we put in place, as you know, a retaliatory tariff package of $30 billion, and then an additional tariff package to match the new aluminum tariffs that the U.S. has put on. Should the U.S. take their measures further, then Canada will respond accordingly. We have a package of retaliation that's prepared to be deployed. That's about $125 billion worth of goods. And there's things that we can, like has been discussed, there are tools that we can use. It has yet to be determined whether those tools would be effective. What we're doing right now is engaging with the influencers in the U.S. So the folks in the states that have the ear of the president, that are going to experience direct impacts because Canadians are their major customer. They export the majority of their goods to Canada, and they're going to see a significant increase in prices and inflation, and a decrease in investment in workforce in places where New Brunswick companies are operating right now. We do shipping out of Mississippi. We have people in manufacturing operations in North Dakota, in Nebraska, and other places, and those are governed by Republicans that can get a message to the president to make clear what I think is becoming more and more clear to Americans. We hear the business community in the U.S. speaking up, the investment community in the U.S. speaking up, and they're starting to put pressure on the White House to change this strategy. And so we're going to continue to do the diplomacy and the lobbying to the key players in the U.S. to understand what's going to dry up in terms of Canadian investment and partnership for them, and how it's going to impact the people of their state if they continue forward with this plan.
Thank you. Nick Moore, CTV.
Thank you. Hi, Premier. Just wondering, what has been the reaction from Maine Governor Janet Mills when you say it's still on the table, the threat of cutting power? What has been her reaction to that? Is that a threat that you feel that is being taken seriously in Maine?
I think there's a lot of concern from the folks of Maine who, in some cases, don't have any other options. So there are people in northern Maine, and these are some of the most vulnerable people in Maine with some of the lowest incomes that are not connected to the U.S. grid. And one of our fears is, should we cut them off, they may make moves to find ways to connect them into the grid, and we would lose a significant customer and opportunity for revenue over the long term if the U.S. decides that it wants to address their energy security differently. Energy security is something that we think about a lot, but Maine is very concerned that New Brunswick may take this action, but we're not sure that those actions make their way to the White House and prompt a change in behavior there.
Now that we're more than a week into this, just wondering from your point of view, is it still a Team Canada approach here? Is there any concern that provinces some provinces may start to go rogue and do their own deals if they don't like what the collective is doing here?
Thanks for the question, Nick. Look, the Team Canada is still in full effect and very strong. We're meeting on a very regular basis, weekly, sort of face-to-face and by Zoom, with a lot of communication in between those weekly touch points. Every premier is doing different things in terms of media, in terms of the states that they're lobbying, in terms of the engagement that we're having with different secretaries and others. But we are all communicating with each other about what we're doing individually and what we're doing collectively. And there's significant alignment. There's lots of different styles. We have good cops and bad cops and different personalities of how people express themselves. And we are also very clear that each of us has autonomy over our own resources, right? So decisions about New Brunswick's electricity and whether NB Power does or doesn't put costs onto the people of Maine are not decisions that Canada is going to make for us. That's decisions that we are going to make in the best interest of New Brunswickers. But we do that in connection with each other because we all have different realities in terms of, like I discussed, our contracts for electricity, the spot market, and other things. But we talk about how we take those steps, who's taking what step when, and whether that's in service of our collective goal, which is to fight these tariffs, to get them reduced and removed as quickly as possible. We are all unified in that objective, and we continue to work as one Team Canada to achieve that outcome.
Alexandre Boudreau, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Merci. Je comprends que vous êtes très réticente à utiliser l'outil de l'électricité envoyé au Maine pour faire pression sur les États-Unis, mais j'aimerais savoir si c'est pas ça, de quels moyens de pression est-ce que le Nouveau-Brunswick dispose? Puis, dans le fond, est-ce qu'on repose entièrement sur les initiatives du gouvernement fédéral puis leurs contre-tarifs? Ou est-ce qu'on a d'autres moyens de pression de notre côté?
C'est une bonne question parce qu'on n'a pas une douzaine d'outils à notre disponibilité. On regarde nos frontières et nos routes et est-ce qu'il y a des choses qu'on peut faire pour éviter de l'activité là, à notre port aussi, puis à notre infrastructure de transportation. On regarde les coûts qu'on met en place pour qui utilise nos ressources. On ne peut pas diriger le secteur privé de faire des choses qui ne... on n'a pas l'autorité de forcer le secteur privé de faire des choses avec leur prix ou leur relation avec leurs clients. On peut seulement gérer des institutions qui sont dans la responsabilité du gouvernement. Alors, il y a pas beaucoup d'outils. On peut changer nos habitudes. On peut arrêter d'acheter leurs produits. On peut faire que leurs achats de nous autres sont plus chers pour les choses qu'on peut contrôler les prix. Et il n'y a pas toutes les options au monde. Alors, c'est la réalité. Mais il y a des questions au niveau de nos ressources, des demandes au niveau de nos ressources aussi, qu'on peut utiliser ça comme un futur. À qui est-ce qu'on va vendre nos ressources et quel contrat est-ce qu'on va considérer?
J'aimerais savoir aussi, j'ai pas vu beaucoup de détails sur l'aide aux travailleurs. J'aimerais savoir s'il y a une personne qui perd son emploi demain, demain hypothétiquement, à cause des tarifs, qu'est-ce que cette personne-là doit faire pour avoir de l'aide, puis quel genre d'aide elle peut obtenir du gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick?
J'apprécie cette question parce que c'est les travailleurs qu'on pense beaucoup qui sont le plus stressé, je pense, qu'au moment, particulièrement s'ils travaillent dans une industrie de foresterie ou de produits pétroliers ou de choses comme ça. Alors, la première chose, c'est le changement au niveau de l'assurance d'emploi qui peut faire de l'application vraiment vite et ils ont l'opportunité, puis on encourage les employeurs d'utiliser l'outil de le partage d'emploi. Alors, avant de terminer un contrat, peut-être le partager avec une autre personne pour qu'il peut avoir encore de le revenu. Mais on a les outils de l'éducation postsecondaire, formation et travail avec Travail Nouveau-Brunswick qui est là pour leur prendre par la main, leur essayer de trouver des autres emplois, leur donner de l'aide avec la formation. Il y a des fonds qui sont là pour pour participer dans des programmes de formation et éducation pour trouver un autre emploi dans un temps assez vite. Ils peuvent recevoir cette aide financière pour changer leur carrière. Mais on sait que c'est une situation temporaire. Alors, notre préférence, c'est qu'ils peuvent continuer à un tel point avec leur employeur. Ils peuvent utiliser de l'aide qui est là avec l'assurance d'emploi. Et notre équipe est là pour leur aider avec tous les services dont ils ont besoin pour déterminer comment gérer la situation.
Thank you very much. We'll now go online. Adam Harris with Post Media, please unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Premier. Premier, you spoke briefly there about critical minerals. I wanted to know if that means more mining projects. And then in the same theme, what does that mean for natural gas development as New Brunswick imports a lot of gas from the United States?
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out, Adam, because again, it's the integrated nature of our economy. The fact that we buy electricity and we buy gas from the U.S., we refine it, we process it here, we sell it back to them. That means that absolute measures are very challenging because they have the potential to backfire on us. But in terms of mineral projects, we see a lot of opportunity to get mineral projects going in this province and to see some more mining happening. We saw some of that start with the Sisson project, but the conditions both in the marketplace for investment and the opportunity to extract these resources, to process them in New Brunswick, to create good paying jobs for a product that is in high demand both strategically and beyond. I'm very hopeful that we will see some of these projects come to fruition in this province in the coming years.
Follow-up, Mr. Harris?
Maybe first you just clarify on the natural gas development in New Brunswick, but then my second question is on interprovincial free trade. You talked about regulated markets. Will you be putting in legislation to mirror that of Nova Scotia? Because that was specifically on all goods manufactured and produced in another province or territory. If they have similar legislation, it would be treated the same as, say, products are in New Brunswick. Are you going that far?
I think these are two different things. So the labor mobility piece that we're advancing is on the 52 regulated professions in New Brunswick, and we're not waiting for other provinces to do it too. We're going ahead and recognizing the credentials of anyone who holds a provincial credential. We'd love to see Nova Scotia do the same thing. We'd love to see Quebec and other provinces do the same thing, but we want to make sure that we have ready access to the talent we need to get us through some of the challenges we're facing in healthcare and housing, and some of the changes that we want to make in terms of our what we already talked about mineral and resource development. So you asked about natural gas specifically, and so we don't have investors or proponents looking at New Brunswick's natural gas right now the same way that we do on some of the mineral side with manganese and molybdenum and antimony and indium and tungsten and some of the other opportunities that are here. I think New Brunswickers have expressed their feelings on natural gas development, and that market has shifted considerably. We would be very interested in seeing the federal government take the bull by the horns in terms of creating the opportunity for Western resources to make their way east. So we'd love to see that kind of pipeline project advance and make its way to New Brunswick. We know there's lots of challenges facing that kind of movement, and one of them being the absence of a proponent, which is the same thing that we see on the natural gas side in New Brunswick.
Thank you. New MC, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour Madame Holt. Vous avez commencé à répondre à Jacques tout à l'heure pour la question que je voudrais vous adresser. Est-ce que vous n'êtes pas d'une certaine manière en train de dire aux Néo-Brunswickois que malheureusement on n'a pas suffisamment d'outils et qu'il va falloir continuer, il va falloir souffrir simplement parce qu'on ne peut pas réellement s'opposer à ce que les Américains sont en train de faire, que nous, le Nouveau-Brunswick, nous sommes trop petits pour nous opposer à ce qu'ils font?
Non, ça c'est pas le message du tout. On a des outils comme un membre d'un pays qui peut réagir d'une façon unie pour mettre en place des exemptions, des tarifs, je m'excuse, c'est quoi le mot, de représailles. On a un plan maintenant pour choisir à quel à quelle vigueur, à quelle amplitude vont être ces mesures de représailles. Puis ça, c'est une discussion entre les provinces et le gouvernement fédéral. À quel point on veut aller avec ces tarifs de représailles? Est-ce qu'on veut fermer nos frontières? Nouveau-Brunswick a des outils à utiliser. On n'a pas 30 outils à utiliser. On a quelques outils, le même que d'autres provinces. On imagine Nouvelle-Écosse, l'île du Prince-Édouard, Terre-Neuve, qui ne sont pas même connectés aux États-Unis. On est plus fort ensemble et on a un gouvernement fédéral qui est prêt à faire n'importe qu'est-ce qu'on a besoin pour éliminer ces tarifs-là. On veut le faire d'une façon où on diminue l'impact négatif sur le Canada et certainement moi, je veux diminuer l'impact négatif sur le Nouveau-Brunswick. À ce point, on ne peut pas éviter le fait qu'il y a un impact négatif au niveau de les producteurs de l'acier et de l'aluminium à ce moment. Je préfère que ça arrête là. Et si le gouvernement des États-Unis décide de retourner à leur plan pour mettre des tarifs autour de l'économie de 25 10 sur les produits d'énergie, on va répondre avec nos tarifs de représailles, puis on va regarder si ça a l'impact qu'on espère. On voit que ça fonctionne déjà. On a mis des représailles en place, puis les États-Unis ont enlevé leurs tarifs. Alors, on ne veut pas aller trop loin pour faire un impact négatif qui n'est pas nécessaire sur nos citoyens, mais on a des outils ici au Canada. Le Canada a les choses que les États-Unis ont besoin. Ils ont besoin de notre électricité, de nos produits d'énergie, de notre potash. Je ne sais pas qu'est-ce que c'est en français. Potash? De notre uranium, de nos produits minéraux. Ils ont besoin de notre seafood, de notre produit de foresterie. Ils vont trouver vraiment vite que ça va être vraiment difficile pour eux d'accomplir leur objectif sans les produits primaires qui viennent du Canada, qu'ils utilisent pour transformer et pour vraiment faire bouger leur économie. Alors, j'ai beaucoup d'optimistes qu'on a les outils de façon nationale, puis Nouveau-Brunswick est chanceux d'influencer les décisions au niveau des tarifs de représailles, au niveau de nos actions contre les États-Unis pour gagner cette guerre commerciale.
Ouais, pour potasse, je pense que c'est fertilisant, mais je ne suis pas sûr. Je réfléchis. Ouais, la potasse? Oui, c'est sans doute ça, oui. Alors, l'autre question que je voulais poser, parce que vous parlez tout à l'heure de la santé mentale des Néo-Brunswickois, des Canadiens en général. On a vu que Dennis King est parti, entre autres, parce qu'il disait qu'il n'était pas sûr de pouvoir supporter ça pendant 4 ans. Bon, la question, maintenant, je vous l'adresse à vous. Vous n'étiez pas préparé à faire face à cette situation. Comment est-ce qu'on se sent en tant que première ministre ou de manière générale, vos collègues face à cette situation? Vous avez dit que vous allez faire cet exercice-ci tous les jeudis. Est-ce que c'est raisonnable de penser qu'on va pouvoir faire ça pendant les 4 prochaines années?
Oh, ben, je pense que c'est raisonnable parce que c'est ma job de connecter avec les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises dans une période d'incertitude, dans une période d'anxiété où ceux qui vivent ici dans notre province sont peur. Ils ont des stress et c'est mon job de faire le travail nécessaire pour qu'on peut gérer la situation le meilleur possible, qu'on peut réduire cette anxiété et ce stress-là avec de la transparence, avec la communication, de leur dire « Hey, j'ai pas toute la réponse. J'ai jamais entré dans une situation comme ça parce que ça n'est jamais arrivé où on a un threat. Une menace à notre économie. On n'a jamais vu ça dans le Canada depuis le temps que ça existe à cet niveau. Alors, mais moi, j'ai les outils, j'ai l'équipe, j'ai l'expérience et j'ai certainement la conviction qu'ici à Nouveau-Brunswick, avec nos voisins, avec le membre de notre province, avec nos leaders d'entreprise, nos leaders communautaires, avec nos chambres de commerce, tout le monde unis, qu'on va défendre notre province, on va défendre nos intérêts, on va aider nos amis dans notre voisinage, on va aider les travailleurs, les entrepreneurs, on va faire ce travail ensemble pour assurer qu'on va être là plus fort de l'autre côté. Et moi, ça me donne, je suis prêt pour ce travail. Je suis prêt pour assurer les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises que nous avons une province forte, avec des ressources, avec de la résilience, et on va l'utiliser. Mais c'est d'accord d'être peur, c'est d'accord d'être inquiète, c'est d'accord de ne pas savoir qu'est-ce qui va arriver. Nous avons le cœur pour le travail, nous avons les dos et les épaules pour le travail, puis on va le faire ensemble.
Thank you. Michael McDonald, Canadian Press, please unmute your mic and ask your questions, please.
Hi, Premier, can you hear me?
I can, Michael.
You've been saying, you've made it clear that cutting off electricity to northern Maine would be risky and could backfire, especially in the long run. But you haven't really said very much about imposing surcharges in the same way that Doug Ford had threatened to do. That seemed to get the attention of the White House right away. Could you explain why that's not an option?
Yes, thanks for asking the question, because I can try to make it more clear. The situation in Ontario with electricity is different. They sell electricity on the spot market, whereas in New Brunswick, we sell to Maine under contract. We have a couple different types of contracts, and just under half of them do not allow for us to levy that kind of tariff or fee onto the agreed upon price. The other half of them, that is an option. We have looked at the revenue that might generate and who it might impact. It would impact, in some cases, organizations that are New Brunswick employers. It would impact health centers that New Brunswickers use. And we also buy power from Maine, where they could choose to take the same tact and add a similar increase to price to the energy that we purchase back to them, which would end up costing us money and hurting us in the long run. There's also the risk that they decide that they're going to fortify and connect their grid, and we lose that business and that client for the long term. So these are decisions that need to be taken very carefully. They can't be made as a knee-jerk reaction, or because our situation here in New Brunswick is unique, and we want to do the kinds of things that are likely to achieve the result we want, which is an elimination of the tariffs. I'm not certain that adding a surcharge to what the folks in Maine experience is going to yield a result from the White House, and instead will just cause damage to a relationship that we want to protect in the long run.
Second question, Mr. McDonald.
Premier, if you could speak directly to the president today, what would you tell him?
Oh. I would tell him that he's hurting his people. We see it. We hear it from our neighbors in Maine. We see it from the folks that we're going down to the Seafood Expo. I hear from Americans constantly, I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed for what our government is doing. We hear from people who have already experienced the blip of price increases to their heating oil, to their gas. I see the stress on the faces of congresspeople and senators and governors that are exceptionally frustrated because they know that this is going to mean a loss of jobs in their state. I would try to get through to the president to say, look, you're hurting the American people. You're hurting your largest trading partner. Canada buys more from the U.S. than anyone else in the world. And right now, we are looking beyond the U.S. to find new partners and new customers. And we might not be there when they come to their senses and realize that this has been a productive and successful relationship for the long term. But right now, the president is hurting his very people. He's hurting Canadians in the process. And I think if he wants a strong economy in the U.S. and a strong and stable U.S., his best path to do that is in partnership with Canada.
Thank you. Anna Mandan, Global.
Good afternoon, Premier. I want to follow up on a question that's already been asked. What update can you provide on reducing the trade barriers? What exemptions specifically, and are you looking at any additional measures?
I wish that I had for you the list of the 16 exemptions that we've identified to come off of our procurement list. I'm sorry that I don't have those right now, but these are the types of things that say that folks have to prefer or are exempted from not being able to prefer New Brunswick products, whether that's our crown corporations or otherwise, things that restrict access to resources, whether those be aquacultural or forestry. And so we can find for you the list of those. I think that the 9 exemptions that we've already removed, the 1 that's being edited, and the other 6 that are on the table waiting for the next stage of the negotiation with the CFTA. But those have already been approved through cabinet, and now we're kind of a little frustrated maybe that the provinces on the other side aren't moving on these things. We've decided to do them anyway. Again, I'll say these are not things that require reciprocity. We're not waiting for other people to act and saying we're only going to act if. We're going to cut our exemptions on the procurement side in half, and then we're making the moves I've already described on labor mobility to recognize that anyone with a provincial certification from anywhere in Canada can come and bring those skills and talents to New Brunswick. There is some legislation that has to be put in place to get a piece of that labor mobility thing to work, so that's going to get tabled when we open the ledge. There is a piece of legislation required for the direct-to-consumer changes and the personal exemption changes, so the legislation is being drafted that's going to push that through the House, and again, we're doing that on our own without reciprocity.
Has or will your government back out of already signed contracts with U.S. companies, and if so, how many?
You're piggybacking on the question of Jacques that I didn't get to the end of. So that procurement has been going through all of our contracts with the U.S. and to determine whether we can get out of them, whether we have an alternative supplier, and what that process, what the fees to cancel a contract might look like, what it might cost us to move the business to another one. So I don't have all of the details of the fact that there's 72 of them and these ones we can't and these ones we can, but I can get some more detail for you on that.
Thank you. We're going online. Vicky Hogarth, CHCO.
Thank you, Bruce. Premier Holt, last week I reached out to CBSA to see if there are any tariff exemptions for Campobello Islanders who rely on getting certain day-to-day essentials from Maine. CBSA redirected me to the Federal Department of Finance, who said they're aware of the situation on the island and they will get back to me, but they haven't yet. Meanwhile, Islanders are now facing long lines at the border where grocery store items are being looked at item by item and tariffed accordingly. I'm just wondering if there's any new information that we can give to Islanders that might alleviate some of the added stresses that they're feeling.
Thank you for the question, Vicki, because you're right to call out the fact that the folks in Campobello have it harder than pretty much any other New Brunswicker right now, and often feel overlooked and forgotten about when because of their unique situation and the fact that they have no other choice but to go into the U.S. for a lot of the daily goods and necessities that they have. And I'm sorry to hear that you didn't get the response you were looking for from the federal government, but we can try to help you out with that and to help out the folks in Campobello. I know our Minister of Local Government was talking to the mayor in Campobello and I think is going there tomorrow. Actually, I think Minister Kennedy is going to be in Campobello tomorrow, but let me just double check to confirm that, to get on the ground with those folks and see if we can more successfully advocate with the federal government to get the kind of conditions around the necessities that don't hammer the people of Campobello the way that they're experiencing right now.
Follow up, Ms. Hogarth?
Thank you for that. And the Prime Minister, he's openly suggested that Trump is trying to use economic force to annex Canada. You touched on this today, too. Is this a sentiment among premiers and among federal ministers that the U.S. president's motivations with these tariffs might be to annex our country? And if so, should we be more vocal about this on the world stage? Is it time?
Oh, actually, I think there's a lot of conversations happening on the world stage with our partners in Europe and the UK and in Asia and other places about what the president has clearly stated is his intent to reset the global order, and that we are not the only people in his sights as he talks about Greenland and other places. And so the premiers, as well as the Prime Minister, take very seriously the threat that the president has issued about wanting to annex Canada. It will never happen, and we've made it quite clear that Canada is not having those conversations and will defend at every step our sovereignty and with allies around the world that are communicating the same messages to the White House about their territories and countries. It is absolutely something we should take seriously, but I think the U.S. is starting to feel the repercussions of those decisions as they see purchase of U.S. goods tanking around the world. Canada isn't the only place that has stopped buying U.S. Their opportunity to procure some of the resources and services they need to achieve their interests have dried up completely. And so I think that the White House is in they're spiraling a bit and challenged to have rhetoric match action, and the people around the president are trying to find their way through this. But Canada is clear in its resolve to defend our sovereignty, and we have allies around the world that will back us up on that, and that we will be there for them as well.
Thank you. Alexander Johnson with All New Brunswick.
Good afternoon, Premier. I wanted to ask, you mentioned that New Brunswick is being affected by these steel tariffs. I'm not aware of any steel makers here in the province. Can you talk a bit more about how the province is being affected by those tariffs?
Well, we have companies like OSCO, like Ocean Steel, and others that are in the St. John area. We also have companies that require those products as inputs to what they produce and make for New Brunswickers, whether that's in construction or in some of our heavy industry that is producing large products, whether that be the ambulance sensors or others that are going out into the world. So we have some folks that are using it as inputs, and we also have some folks who trade in those primary materials. And so it is impacting us in terms of the ability to sell that product from companies that are headquartered here in New Brunswick, as well as the ability to access it for our own purposes.
Follow-up, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you. When it comes to critical minerals, what is the province doing or plans to do to see those resources developed?
A number of things. So it's a mandate that I've given to Minister John Herron to see if we can really realize the potential of the minerals that exist here in New Brunswick. The team was actually at the Prospectors and Developers Association conference in Toronto a week or two ago. We've been engaging with investors who have expressed an interest to finance the development of our resources, as well as working with the community of junior prospectors and developers that exist in New Brunswick around very specific assets. I mentioned some of them earlier. We're also looking at some of our colleagues across the country that have made moves to ensure the development of those resources happens quickly. And it's a conversation we're having with the federal government, because the federal government obviously plays a role in the approval of projects like this. We have heard and learned from our colleagues across the country some of the challenges there. So all of us are engaging with the feds to ensure that we can get our resources developed and into the market, particularly at a time such as this. There's some great learnings from Manitoba that got a project from start to finish in under 2 years. So we're looking at some of the changes they made to the regulatory model. There's a number of things happening on that front, and I'm going to be excited for Minister Herron to talk to you more about it in the weeks ahead.
Silas Brown, CBC.
Just to go back to the subject of the power, potential surcharges, that sort of thing, my understanding of how NB Power operates in the New England market, most of the power that's being bought is then being sold back in the market for a profit, something that they've come to quite rely on, I think to the tune of about $1 billion last year. Does that financial dependence and the lack of financial health of the utility hamper your ability to take some of these further measures like surcharges beyond, the worry about potential impacts? I mean, the point of doing this would be to make it hurt and to send a message. Does the financial health of the utility prevent some of that?
Oh, absolutely. If we're sacrificing revenues and customers, that's got to be borne by New Brunswick customers that are already struggling to pay their power bills and power rates. And the utility is in an exceptionally challenged position with a significant amount of debt that they are not making progress on, with maintenance deficit across the board, with assets that are underperforming, and with a plan of rate increase for the foreseeable future that is more than New Brunswickers can bear. So, as I've said before, that the status quo is no longer an option with NB Power, but you're right that that does not put us in a great position where we're reliant on critical contracts with the U.S. We're also reliant on their energy. We buy energy from the U.S. when we need it because we don't have the kind of stable delivery of supply of electricity here for some of those peak moments. And so we can't expose ourselves to a possible increase in rates at peak times when we need to buy those kilowatt hours from the U.S. because of actions we've taken that impact a number of customers in the north of the province. So there's a lot of pieces that we have to manage very carefully, and unfortunately we're not doing it. We're doing it with a utility that is faced with exceptional challenges that we can't keep kicking down the road. The issues that NB Power has faced have been punted down the road by successive governments for far too long. Something has to be done about it, and our government is going to be the one that does.
Perfect segue into my next question, because you did, when you were speaking directly to New Brunswickers, you did say that when it comes to power bills that you're looking at many other options, and there will be announcements in the week ahead.
Weeks.
In the weeks ahead, yeah, sorry. I have trouble with plurals.
I just don't want people expecting it to come by next Friday.
No, I'm not. Don't worry. What exactly is on the table here? I mean, are we talking about rate freezes? Are we talking about further rebates? Are we talking about the province taking on a portion or all of the debt of the utility? Like, what exactly is on the table here? Because it's not a long list of options, as I understand.
Well, I mean, you've named some of them, and there are others, right? We're looking at the policies that oversee NB Power and things like their requirement around debt and debt payment and the ratios that they need to achieve there. We're looking at the regulatory environment that they're operating in. We're looking at partnerships and other things, but all of that will be, as we're finalizing these decisions and considering what can they do, what might it cost, who will be impacted, that work is being done right now. And we're doing it as quickly as we can because we know New Brunswickers are frustrated. I want to take a minute, if I can, though, to ask New Brunswickers to not take this out on NB Power. They are challenged, but we are hearing stories of people driving an NB Power truck or parking it in their yard and getting harassed, getting yelled at in parking lots, or getting treated poorly because they're working for NB Power. And I'd like to ask New Brunswickers to please not. I know it's when you call the call center, you need a place to vent, you want to express your frustrations, but let's not take it out on the people, our neighbors that are doing this work. There are structural and fundamental challenges with NB Power that our government is going to tackle with you. We're going to put together the kind of communication and transparency that you need to be convinced that we're going to make the fundamental changes required so that you have access to affordable, reliable, sustainable power in this province for the long term. It's not something that we can say today. So we're doing that work, and we're doing it as quickly as we can, and we look forward to sharing with New Brunswickers the choices we've made on what we can do in the moment and what we're going to do for the long term.
Just to clarify, because you did say that some of, I mentioned 3 options there, and you said some of those are on the table. Which of those?
Sorry, all of those are on the table. We're looking at how we support ratepayers. We're looking at rates that have already been booked in by the EUB, exploring the legalities of what we can do there, as well as for the next ones in April and the timing. Are there changes we can make legislatively that change the next EUB hearings? Like, we're exploring every possible opportunity to put something in place that New Brunswickers can bear that also sets us up long-term for a functioning, sustainable utility. But it's going to take bigger changes than just temporary help or Band-Aids to rates. One of the reasons we're in this position is because successive governments have artificially frozen rates or put them in places where that has wiped out MB Power's inability to do the kind of maintenance that they needed to do. It's generated the kind of deficits to the asset and the kind of debt that is now an albatross around our neck. So we're conscious that we don't want to make the same mistakes that have put us in this position, but that we need to do something different with this utility to have a reliable, affordable source of power generation for New Brunswickers for generations to come. So that's the work. Wow, it's on the table.
Andrew Waugh, Post Media.
Hi, Premier. So yesterday, the Deputy Premier told me that cutting off power to Maine is off the table. I just want some clarity here. Is it off the table or is it not off?
It's not something that we're doing right now, and it's not something that we're doing tomorrow. In order for us to consider that option, the situation would have to change dramatically in terms of the tariffs that New Brunswick is exposed to and how those are impacting our economy.
Follow up, Mr. Waugh?
So, yeah, I do. So one of the reasons he gave for that, his justification was that he didn't think that New Brunswick or New Brunswickers would be interested in potentially putting people's lives at risk, which he believes that could be the case if you cut off power to those 58,000 customers. So you are prepared to put people's lives at risk if necessary?
Absolutely not. There is, and as we've talked about today, there's a question of cutting off power and there's a question of adding tariff to power costs. We saw even in Ontario that while the threat of cutting off power was there, it wasn't actually something that can be done technically or that should be done ethically. Making power more expensive is a more direct route and sometimes has the same impacts because some of the people that rely on this power, as we've said, are some of the most vulnerable people in Maine, as well as some of the healthcare services and industries that directly impact New Brunswickers. So we're not looking to put people's lives at risk, but the livelihood of New Brunswickers has been put at risk by a president that has threatened economic measures that will impact jobs and people's incomes here in New Brunswick. So we have to consider all of our options, and we have to do that with cool heads, and we have to do that with information. We have to consider all of the possible impacts and make sure that we're making the best decision for New Brunswick for tomorrow and for the long term with neighbors that we are exceptionally economically integrated with. So these are decisions that need to be taken very carefully, whether you want to call them decisions of life or death or not. There's serious impact to the livelihood of New Brunswickers, and we are looking to protect that livelihood with every measure required.
Radio-Canada, Maxime Boissini.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a clarification here. We have the Premier saying it's still possible to cut off power to Maine, and the Deputy Premier saying it's not going to happen. You're trying to put out a unified message here, so I'm trying to understand, should we just not be listening to the Deputy Premier on this issue? And, you know, obviously you're the Premier, so did he speak out of turn?
No, what the Deputy Premier said is right for now. We are not doing that measure. It's not happening today. It's not happening tomorrow. It's not something we want to do, and I would suggest it's not advisable to do. I think the repercussions of a decision like that would be significant and negative and harm New Brunswickers. Does it mean that we will never, ever do it? Those are hypotheticals that it doesn't make sense to tie our hands for forever when we don't know what's coming next from the President of the United States. And so it's not a move that we're making today or tomorrow, or if there aren't further actions from the U.S., you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that happen. So the Deputy Premier and I are on the same page about this.
Radio-Canada, Maxime Boissini.
We're way over time, eh, Bruce? Like, I was supposed to be in another meeting.
Okay.
20 minutes
That
ago.
concludes today's update. Ça termine notre mise à jour. Merci beaucoup.